The final war has already begun, at least according to Gunko, and at least according to the parts of her that were left after being eviscerated by a powersome long nose, before displaying unnatural abilities that we have certainly seen before, and now I am more worried about Gunko than ever, as well as the rest of the Holy Knights. These guys, they're not good. But this chapter actually started on a very hopeful note, as this was a very exciting installment in the Yamato cover story, because for the first time, Yamato seems to be truly inhabiting the life of Kozuki Oden by what appears to be recruiting vassals in the form of Ulti and probably Page 1, which is very Oden-esque because most of his vassals were criminals and other various ne'er-do-wells that were seen as a blight on Wano. As was Oden himself, he was disowned by his father. And do you remember what Oden said when he learned about his father's decision? Oden said that his father was unable to contain Oden's greatness, in much the same way that Kaido was attempting to contain Yamato. And I don't know how much time we have left in this cover story, but I'm wondering if Ulti and Page 1 are just the first, and if there's a possibility that Yamato may be able to recruit all of the remaining Toby Roper members, minus Diaz Drake because he's already found a way off Wano. But I wouldn't rule out who's who joining as a vassal as well. At the very least, he might be tagging along for a bit because we need Yamato to contain him, although I believe we're currently in Udon, so there should be a very convenient prison nearby. But this is the 31st installment in the Yamato cover story, so we are very potentially coming to the end of it quite soon. Most cover stories last into the early to mid-30s, with a couple of them extending into the 40s. But the main plot of this story was all the kidnapped people, and now that we've solved that, I could see this wrapping up pretty quickly. All Yamato needs to do is take Yasuo's sword to Hakumai, and we should be all good here. All good to turn our attention to Elbaf, and Usopp has a pretty spectacular moment in this chapter where he delivers the most devastating attack of his lifetime, blowing Gunko to pieces with a nice skull bomb, an attack that I think I've recently said should be more devastating than it ever ends up being. But unfortunately for Usopp, these attacks are only allowed to succeed when they do no damage, and therefore I guess do not succeed. But I love how shocked everyone was, including Usopp himself, because it was an almost Tarantino-esque sudden moment of ultra-violence. You know, when all of a sudden just bang, an integral character is unceremoniously killed. But then Gunko starts regenerating, and there is no doubt in my mind that this is the exact same regeneration ability we've seen before with the 5 Elder Stars, which may not be immediately apparent in some examples because Saint Saturn's regeneration is portrayed a bit differently. However, if you look at when Atlas blew herself up to briefly stop Ethan Baron Venusturo, he regenerated in the same way that Gunko is here with the exact same sound effect. In the official English, this was translated as crick crick, but in Japanese, it's paki paki, which is the onomatopoeia for the sound of breaking, cracking, or snapping. And it's the exact same onomatopoeia that accompanies Gunko's regeneration in this chapter. So far, I have to say, I've been pretty dismissive of the idea that Gunko could be physically connected to Imu, or even part of Imu, until now, that is. Just like how you've been rather dismissive of the award-winning flavor available through the sponsor of this video, Fume, which means that award-winning flavor goes to you, because we all have bad habits we wish we could break, some worse than others. For example, and this is real, sometimes I will leave my clean clothes in the washing machine post-wash, essentially turning it into a glorified drawer. Because why am I going to take them out of one storage cube just to go and put them in another storage cube? They're already in there. It makes no sense, but my wife disagrees, and thus that habit needs changing. And Fume makes it incredibly easy to swap out the bad for something much more better, an award-winning flavored air experience that is not a vape, contains no nicotine, no batteries, and Fume cores are much closer to herbal teas, which you can use anywhere at a fraction of the cost of smoking or vaping. Because this is neither of those things. This is flavor for your mouth, not your lungs. And one such flavor would be the Cinnamon Hearts core, to give you that warm embrace of the memories you've just viciously extracted from the mind brain of your lover. It's a very specific flavor for the more refined of fictional pirate appreciators. And Fume have now served over 300,000 customers, and you, yes, you could be another one by clicking my link in the description. Go to tryfume.com/GrandLineReview or scan the QR code on screen and use my code GrandLineReview to get a free Fume topper, which is an awesome accessory to level up your experience when you order your journey pack today. So try them out. I'm a big fan, but for now, it's back to you. Me. Before, people were only making the connection of Gunko to Imu because of the arrow. But with the regeneration and the ability to conjure the Abyss Circles, it's like Gunko is Imu's equivalent of one of Vegapunk's satellites. However, that could just be because Gunko is the only Holy Knight we've seen conjure the Abyss Circle and regenerate, and it is possible that each of the Holy Knights have been gifted and or cursed with this power, which would make them a huge pain in the man parts to deal with, and in which case Elbaf is the arc where we need to discover the weakness to this ability, because there's no running away this time. We've got to deal with these guys right here, right now. When Colin accuses Gunko of the worst possible crime, the crime of being human, Gunko very quickly sets the record straight by saying, "Mate, we are gods," which I guess is not unexpected from a holy knight, but it is unexpected from someone who isn't a celestial dragon. And the crew go on to say that Gunko sounds like NL, which is fun. It's always nice to have an NL mention in the series, which I don't think we've had since Luffy remembered seeing observation Haki when Rayleigh was training him in the final pre-time skip chapter. But they also say that Gunko sounds like a world noble, and I wonder if this might be a bit of a misdirect, because the world nobles do refer to themselves at every available opportunity and as obnoxiously as possible as gods, but we do know through the repeatedly satisfying beatings of St. Charlos that they do not have the abilities of Gunko, the Five Elders, and perhaps even the rest of the Holy Knights. So when Gunko uses this god terminology, she may be referring to a very different existence and something much closer to a literal god than the delusions of the average world noble. Gunko got so mad when Colin called her a human, and there's a very curious close-up after this. Gunko pulls a very Jotaro maneuver by grabbing the tip of her hat, and for some reason we then cut to a close-up of Brook. And initially I thought this might be because he was the only character left who hadn't had a close-up on that page yet, but Eiichiro Oda is a very careful man, and he doesn't tend to create a lot of throwaway panels. There is a reason why he saved Brook for this moment. And the reason why is because later it is Brook, of all people, who is able to identify Gunko as a holy knight. Not necessarily Gunko herself, but Brook knew exactly what she was, and this is beyond fascinating to me. As far as I'm aware, nobody except for Loki knew that holy knights were on this island, and it's also hard to tell how many people know about holy knights in general, because even Jinbei in this chapter doesn't pick up on Gunko's status in the same way that Brook does, and Jinbei is usually our reliable reservoir of global knowledge. I imagine that Robin probably knows about them because Dragon does, and she spent 2 years with the Dragon. And I don't know if I'm reading into this too much. I probably am. I always do. But I do think that Oda's giving us a bit of insight into Brook here. If he knows about the Holy Knights, it means that he either heard about them while he was alive, which is a very long time ago, or more interestingly, he even met the Holy Knights during his living career as a pirate, or more likely even before that, during his secret pre-pirate history, where he was the leader of a certain kingdom's battle convoy. Brook has a history of being a pretty high-up military official for a currently unknown kingdom, and I can see a diplomatic situation where Holy Knights of the time were present on his island, and Brook may have seen firsthand exactly the kind of power that they're capable of. I'm fully willing to accept that this is just me dreaming, but One Piece is all about dreams, and right now I'm really feeling like Oda is going out of his way to link Brook and Gunko, because he's the one who seems to have this knowledge and maybe even personal history with the Holy Knights, and she's the one who is listening to his music right before attacking the Colin Pirates. I should say that Gunko does not recognize Brook in this chapter, despite being a huge fan of his music, or at least that one song, but I do think that there's some business being set up here, and it may depend more on a situation where Brook actually needs to play music, maybe as some sort of plan to wake the kids up. And just to cap off the Brook discussion, he also had my favorite line of the chapter, which was while Gunko was regenerating, Brook was musing about how unnerving it was to watch the dead rise, which is my favorite kind of Brook joke. The skull jokes are very easy and quite predictable, but I love whenever Brook is freaked out by the supernatural, despite the fact that he is a living skeleton soul king. In general, I have to say that Gunko seriously elevated herself in this chapter, because she took on 4 straw hats and dismissed them all pretty comfortably, which isn't so much a surprise for Nami, Usopp, and even Brook, but the really shocking thing is just how easily she handled Jinbei, because that guy is a step up from everyone else in this group. There is a reason why his bounty is over 1 billion berries, although I guess technically Brook is the one who deals with Jinbei because Gunko manipulates their attacks to hit one another. And I think that finesse is a good word. Gunko uses her abilities very thoughtfully, very gratefully, with wonderful finesse. She's like a surgeon making very precise incisions. And she's quite a terrifying opponent because it appears that when you're fighting Gunko, you're not just fighting her, you are also fighting yourself. Stop hitting yourself. And she's one opponent where ganging up on her actually gives Gunko an advantage, because she now has more firepower to take from your allies and turn back back onto you. I do also think it was pretty important for Gunko to dismiss, 40% of the crew here? Not so much as a display of raw power, I mean, that's part of it. The Holy Knights are, in the grand scheme of things, a hierarchical step down from facing the 5 elders on Egghead, so they can't help but feel a bit underwhelming in comparison, and so there is that desire to see them fight battle real good. But with Gunko, it's more about thematic importance, because Gunko has a very revealing monologue that we will get into, but there Gunko makes it clear that she has completely submitted herself to fate. Gunko doesn't even know if any of her actions, any of the things she's doing right now are going to have any meaning in the long run. Everything she's doing could be completely pointless. And this is very much reflected in her Devil Fruit ability. Gunko creates arrows of unstoppable fate. Everything you do against them may be completely pointless. And even when you know what's going to happen, you can't do anything about it, which is the situation we're in right now. We know that the world is going to be plunged into a colossal war for better or worse, which has previously been told to us by Kozuki Oden, planned for by the Roger Pirates, and now even dictated to us by the ancient Harley text on Elbaf. And sometimes it can definitely feel like, even when things are going real well, that One Piece is very much on rails. If Luffy strays too far from the rails, then fate intervenes to put him back on again. But in order to defeat a Gunko, you're gonna need to figure out how to overcome this. And so dealing with her could be our thematic first step towards changing the fate of the planet as we know it. Because as much as we believe that we're heading to the dawn of the world, whether that's a better or worse option than what we have right now has been left quite purposely vague. Currently, fate could have locked in a pretty terrible outcome that we're gonna have to find a way to fight back against. And a key element in doing so, at least according to Gunko, is which side has the allegiance of the giants. And now, with that, all of a sudden Elbaf is making so much more sense. Not just Elbaf either, but everything we've seen of giants in One Piece up to this point. With that goal in mind, you can see why Mother Carmel was an emissary on Elbaf to traffic giant children to enlist in the Marines, because they know that the giants are going to be integral, and so the world government was doing everything they could to build an army of their own giants. And that's also why they went to some great lengths to recruit Oimo and Kashi to protect Enisobi. In theory, it's a lot easier to just kill them for their pirating crimes rather than going to the trouble of turning them into allies. But giants are treated very differently by the world government because this war prophecy demands their presence. And it also makes me wonder how much, if anything, the Big Mom may have known about this, given her desperation to have giants incorporated within her family and make an alliance with Elbaf. And this could also extend to Kaido as well, with one of his goals being to create a nation of Oni, which, as we all know now, are ancient giants. All of which leads us back to Mr. King Harold. St. Summers curses King Harold at the end of this chapter, indicating that Harold did have a deal with the world government at some point in time, and he could have been the one working with Mother Carmel to sell off the giant orphans. And Summers is very, very miffed that Harold seems to have messed all of this up, and by messing up, that could mean a couple of things. The first may be that Harold had a change of heart and led Elbaf's cultural revolution of peace, which is what he's currently known and remembered for, or that Harold continued his agreement with the world government until Loki found out, at which point Harold suffered death by murder, and Loki himself may be directly responsible for saving the world by changing the future of the giants. And if you look at it that way, Big Mom may also be somewhat responsible for saving the world by accidentally eating Mother Carmel and stopping the steady flow of orphans. And just on Summers, he's currently in battle combat with former Vice Admiral Jaguar D. Saul, and I have to say, I don't like seeing Saul in this condition. He's barely standing, he's bleeding everywhere, and doing whatever he can to make sure that Robin and Chopper stay hidden in his beard, and it's feeling a lot like his last stand on Ohara. Not that I think Saul's going to die, I just don't like seeing it. To me, having Saul die here would defeat the purpose of having him be alive in the first place, because the only worse thing than narratively reviving your characters is then to immediately kill them after you've gone to all that effort. And while I do feel for Robin, there's a panel of her in quite a bit of distress because of what's happening to precious Saul. At the same time though, Robin and Chopper are not weak and helpless, and I'm not sure why they're just hiding in Saul's beard instead of leaping into action to help him, as well as all the children. The way Oda draws them is as if Robin and Chopper are both helpless civilians, or as if they're both kids having their flashback play out in real time with their mentor dying while saving them. And that's a bit disappointing after seeing how much effort and spirit they both had during Wano. Robin became a demon and Chopper was taking on Queen at one point. And I get that there's probably going to be a story purpose for them to need to be hidden and not flagged by Summers at this stage, but it is a bit disappointing to see two mighty Straw Hats depicted as entirely helpless here in the same chapter where Usopp and Nami were doing everything they could against Gunko. Maybe it's all part of a clever ruse. Saul is pretending to be defeated to lower the guard of Mr. St. Summers, and then Robin and Chopper, they're going to leap out of the beard, do a big surprise attack, and then something good things will happen. So maybe that'll happen, and if so, I guess I'll change my opinion. But this week, I have to say, I'm a bit disappointed in both of them. Especially Robin, because she spent all of the major Egghead stuff injured and unconscious, so I hope that Elbaf doesn't keep her in that damsel role for the arc once again. But despite that, another big winner of this chapter was O'Hara in general, as Gunko stated that some humans found out about this future war, and among them was Olvia and Professor Clover. I loved seeing Clover in particular, and it struck me that we've been seeing an awful lot of him lately in the grand scheme of things, as with this panel, Clover has officially made appearances during Wano, Egghead Island, and Elbaf. He's someone that Oda has been keenly keeping on the old mind brain, and I do think that we'll be seeing more of him in the future as well. Maybe not during Elbaf, but after this, what's left? We're getting into very serious stuff. Void Sentries, Laugh Tales, Will of D's, and so you'd better believe that Cloud D. Clover will be featured in some capacity. But given the newfound importance of the Giants, this has me thinking about how Elbaf is going to end, because the standard answer would be to repel the Holy Knights, forge a proper alliance with the Giants, and go into the final war with that certainty that yes, we, good guys, are going to win. Which almost sounds anticlimactic. If we've got all the Giants on our side and they're the major key of this conflict, then where's the tension? So this is unlikely, but I wonder if there's a possible ending where the Giants don't pledge their allegiance to Luffy and instead look elsewhere. We do have the seeds for that potential baked in already, with many of the Giants fearing Nika as a destroyer, and while I can't ever see Dory, Broggy, Saul, and our other key Giants turning against us, it may be a pretty natural move for the rest of the island to fear what Luffy is, because his presence has coincided with this Nightmare Apocalypse beginning, and soon it's going to be known that he was the one who freed Loki, so there's quite a bit that could swing public opinion against Luffy and reverse the classic arc formula where we arrive on an island of enemies and make friends, and have us instead land on an island of friends and make enemies, all of which setting us up for one hell of an uphill struggle during this final war.